Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Christy Johnson, and I'm with Premier Marketing. I work solely with the LTC hybrids. We have been working with this nationwide product around 2 years now, and it's a very strong product for us. It's a cash indemnity style policy. My personal experience with it has been the underwriting is so super smooth with it. Once you do an interview, we have an answer in 2 days. So from an underwriting standpoint, I really like this product. It definitely has some great features. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake Lovell from Nationwide.
Thanks so much, Christy. Thanks, everybody, for taking some time to join us on the call today. As Christy said, my name is Jake Lovell. I am the Care Matters wholesaler that is responsible for about 24 states. And then there's one other of my counterparts that covers the other part of the country. I am really excited to be in this role right now and to work with the linked benefit and hybrid products. Nationwide was highlighted in a Wall Street Journal article about 3 or 4 months ago. And there were some really interesting facts and statistics in that article, one of which that really drew my attention, and another reason that I'm really excited to be in the linked benefit space. And what that was is it actually said that as of last year, there were about 66,000 traditional long-term care policies sold. And when we compare that to linked benefit or hybrid products, there were about 260,000 hybrid products sold. So my personal opinion is I feel that's where the industry is trending, and that's where we're seeing the majority of the sales. I think there's certainly always going to be a place in the market for traditional products, but when you start talking about linked benefit, the different options that they have and the different things and flexibility that Nationwide Care Matters policy covers, it does open some different doors to have these conversations with your clients. So linked benefit and Care Matters in particular is fantastic because it has a front-end death benefit if you never need the long-term care benefit. It has a leveraged long-term care benefit. That's where you're going to see the majority of the leverage out of a policy like this. It also has a return of premium option. So if for some reason you do purchase a policy or a client purchases a policy and they need to get their money back after a certain period of time, depending on the pay structure, they could actually get that return of premium out. And then in the event that they do utilize that long-term care benefit, there's still a back-end death benefit that we'll talk about, which is our residual death benefit. And we'll get into some details on the different things like that. But one of the biggest selling points around Nationwide's product is the fact that we allow for informal caregiving. And there are certain stipulations in certain reimbursement policies that exclude informal caregiving. So when you're having these types of discussions with your clients, just understand and realize what is and is not included and excluded from the contract. When we built the Nationwide Care Matters policy and rolled it out in 2013, we didn't build this product to show at the very top of the spreadsheet. We built it around what people want when they buy these and what they prefer come claim time. So we offer the option of having informal care as part of the contract. And this is a super important conversation to have as you go through the fact-finding process of what's most important to your clients and what they do and do not want covered. So we're going to talk a little bit about the informal caregiving healthcare crisis and some of the ways that we can position the conversation with your clients. We're going to look at our product and some differentiators between the other carriers. And then at the end, I'm going to wrap it up with a quick sales idea on a case study that we can look at some different case design options. So we're going to jump into the informal caregiving presentation here. I'm going to jump through a couple quick slides here, and then we're going to get started. So when we rolled this product out, what we wanted to do, as I mentioned, is build it around what is most important to clients when they go on claim. And what we did is we looked at a couple different numbers and we split out the formal caregiving, whether it's in the home or in a facility, and we compared that to informal caregiving. So we broke this down in dollars, and what we found is a pretty significant number and differentiator of what our policy will cover. So whether it's formal or licensed caregiving in the home or a facility, we found that there's about $241 billion accounted for when we look at those numbers, which is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big number. You're talking about 241 billion with a B dollars accounted for licensed providers. But when we broke that down into what our policy covers, bear in mind, our policy covers both. It covers the licensed caregiving, covers the informal caregiving. But when you compare that to the informal caregiving in the United States, that number actually goes from 241 billion on a licensed provider basis to actually accounting for $522 billion spent on informal caregiving in the United States. So there's a huge opportunity to have that discussion when the conversation pops up about long-term care and where they want to have that care provided and what is and is not covered. So to put those numbers into perspective, not only is the informal caregiving number double what was accounted for on the licensed caregiving, to put that into perspective a little bit more, take it a step further outside of the insurance world, that number is actually more than Walmart did in sales in 2016. So we know that 522 billion were spent on informal caregiving in the United States, and compared to Walmart's sales in 2016, they did about 482 billion. So that's an awful lot of funds and money being accounted for when you compare it to a conglomerate like Walmart. And we're going to go and break this down into a couple different categories and see how this conversation can go with your clients. So informal versus formal caregiver, we're going to break this into 3 different categories and see how these types of things progress and where and who is actually providing this care. So 66% of the care that is being provided in the home is generally exclusively from family members. And that's usually being accounted for from a wife or a daughter, generally. So the majority of care is actually being provided by what our product covers. That number goes from 66% to 26% when you find a combination. So this 66%, I would say this is probably early on in a claim. Claims generally start in the home, and when they start in the home, they're generally provided by family members. Then we move to that 26%. This claim's probably progressed a little bit, some things that the family member may not be able to account for. So then you take that a step further. Only 9% of care is being provided solely by paid or licensed help. So you're talking single digits. And this is what people either want or do not want, depending on how the discussion goes. The beautiful thing about this slide is our policy covers everything. We cover that 66% that's being exclusively provided by a family member in the home. We cover that 26% of the combination as that claim progresses. If that claim goes into a full care, we cover that 9%. So the spectrum is completely covered when you start talking about the Care Matters flexibility. That's what's so important to understand, not just putting this on a spreadsheet and picking the largest possible benefit, because a reimbursement benefit isn't guaranteed. Everything in the nationwide policy, and when you look at an illustration, is fully guaranteed, whether it's the death benefit, whether it's the long-term care benefit, or whether it's the residual death benefit on the back end. A reimbursement policy can show you a large benefit, but if you don't have bills and expenses that account for that, then you're never going to receive that. They send you what your bills and expenses are accounted for. So an informal caregiver, not anything too crazy there, just somebody, an individual, maybe a family member who's providing assistance with those ADLs. So maybe a medical task, it may be something else. And this next slide will break down these ADLs into two categories. And what I really like about it is the two categories are going to be, one being the ADLs. I'm sure all of you have heard and can regurgitate those pretty easily. Qualifying for claim, 2 to 6 ADLs or severe cognitive. That's to qualify for the claim. Now, once you're on claim, this whole concept revolves around staying in the home. And when you stay in your home, there are certain things that need to be covered and accounted for that. There are so many things that need to be considered that may not be when somebody stays in their home. What happens when you stay in your home? Well, you probably have a yard. If you're on a long-term care claim, you are not going to be able to go out and mow your yard and do landscaping and take care of those household chores. Our policy covers all of those. We send the policy owner the full monthly benefit regardless of what their bills and expenses are. And also important to note, we will pay above HIPAA, and if you are at HIPAA or below, we will pay that tax-free. If you exceed the HIPAA per diem this year being $10,800, you need to have some expenses or some receipts to justify that to the IRS to not be taxed on that. But we pay up to HIPAA tax-free regardless of what your bills and expenses are. So if you need to pay the neighbor to cut your grass, then you can do that because we pay a cash benefit. If you need somebody to go do your grocery shopping, you can pay somebody to do that. It's a cash benefit. It offers the utmost flexibility within a linked benefit product. So that's why it's so important not only just to understand what happens when you qualify for claim, but then staying in your home and the things that are covered within the nationwide policy for that flexibility. Now, when we start talking about the caregivers and informal caregivers in particular, there are 3 big issues that they're going to face. Of course, I'm sure you guys can assume income, so money, time, takes a lot of time to take care of somebody, and then unfortunately as well, their health. So I've heard it time and time again, maybe Mrs. Executive, she has her mother has no long-term care in place, she has no benefit, the Mrs. Executive has no choice but to quit her job. We found that an average between men and women, there's about $300,000 in lost wages and benefits lost over that caregiver's lifetime, which is a pretty substantial amount of money. However, if that Mrs. Executive's mother would have had a Care Matters policy, she could have quit her job and helped alleviate some of that financial burden from having to quit her job because she could provide the care and they could use that nationwide benefit to help compensate the mother for providing that care. It may not cover it all, but at least it's something. I'd rather have a little bit than nothing. So not only do we talk about loss of income, but along with that certainly comes loss of time. We found that of the time being provided, there's about 30 billion hours per year spent on informal caregiving. And what I think is really interesting about this slide is not only the 30 billion hours, but of those 30 billion, 22 billion of those hours are being provided by people with full-time jobs. So these folks go to work all day. They do not go straight home to have some additional time with their family. They go to that loved one's house. They help provide that care, and they spend a substantial amount of time with them. Well, what happens when you're spending time, you're burning the candle at both ends, Not only, does their health end up suffering in the end, but your health ends up suffering as well. So we found that starting out at 20 hours of care or less, about 17% of those caregivers are saying that their health has suffered, and it's fair to poor. And then when that progresses to more than 20 hours of care a week, about 22% of those caregivers are saying that their health is fair to poor. And then the most unfortunate situation, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, is 40% of sole caregivers predecease the person that they are providing the care for, which is very sad. I'm sure you all can imagine, and it's usually the spouse. So as we have these discussions, we want to make sure that we're planning for this. Also, since we pay cash and we provide the ultimate flexibility, this is a way to future-proof your plan. You don't know what could come out in the future and what could come out down the road to help with these types of care situations. We don't have stipulations in our contract that say what can and cannot be used for. So down the road, as things progress in science and with caregiving, they can use that benefit how they want to use it. So with a close to this presentation, what we want to really talk about is it price that you're going to pay for the policy, or is it the value that you're going to get out of it? Because that's what's most important, is come claim time, the value that is provided out of these contracts and the flexibility. So we'll open it up for questions at the end. I'm going to move through a couple of different things that we want to discuss, one of being the differentiators piece, and then an additional assessment that we offer for you all from Nationwide for your clients. And I'm going to close with the case design idea. So I'm going to close this out, and then we're going to take a brief look at a couple of different sales ideas. So what we have our healthcare cost assessment, and some of you may have seen this, some of you may have utilized this. I think this is a very valuable piece for you all to utilize. It is something that is free. You don't have to fight your way through it. It's very straightforward. And what it looks like is this is the fact finder piece. So the fact finder is very straightforward. In the end, this is going to be customized. It's going to have your name on it as the producer. It's going to have your client's name on it. And it's a very nice piece, and it's straightforward. The fact finder is literally only 1-2 pages. It is not anything that you're going to have to fight through with your clients. It's literally some yes/no information. There's some additional income questions, and then just a few Medicare coverage questions at the end. So it's very straightforward. When we send out the actual assessment, the income planning team at the top here, this is where you would send this assessment to. They usually turn around in a day or two, and then they'll copy the Nationwide resources on there available if you have any additional questions. When you get the assessment, it identifies multiple different things that you can talk through with your client. This is a sample assessment. This is exactly what it's going to look like when you all receive it. It's going to have the client's name, when it was completed. It's going to have the producer, all of your information. And then we're going to get into the breakdown of the inputs. So exactly what was gone through in the fact finder, which is right here. Also, the nice thing about this is we do have state-specific information. This one was run in Ohio. I'm in Columbus, Ohio at the home office, so I assume that is why they put that in there. But we're going to walk through this, and we're going to see some of the inputs that you can identify as you have these discussions with your clients. So the healthcare expenses. Healthcare expenses in retirement. This can be astronomically expensive. You want to make sure that your clients are preparing for this and they know what could come their way. We're not going to go through this in complete detail, but I want you all to know that it's out there And then if you have additional questions, certainly circle back with Christy, and we can always all have a conference call together to go through this in greater detail. But from a high level, this breaks it down into a couple different things. It has the Mr. and the Mrs., and it shows how these healthcare costs can go up through time, and you want to make sure that they're preparing for that. The other thing it shows, and I'm going to skip through a couple things, is, and what I find is, well, it shows a couple of different things. It shows some Medicare, A, B, D. It breaks down these things. It also has the definitions of what's going to go on, and then the total that it could cost these clients. Now, not only is it going to go through the Medicare information, but this one in particular, when I look at this chart, you see Mr. is passing away at 77 in this instance. That's why everything's blank past here. That's a life insurance opportunity. That means that she, Mrs. Jane, is going to need to prepare for John not being around anymore. So we can project these types of things. So just understand that not only is this identifying some healthcare costs, this is also identifying some life insurance need. And then what I like, and is most important for the discussion that we're all having, is it actually breaks down into some healthcare and assisted / nursing home numbers, so long-term care costs, that if you're having these types of discussions with your clients and you don't know where to start, or, hey, I want to see a Care Matters illustration, but I don't know what benefit to start at, this gives a pretty good idea of when the long-term care claim would projected to be around, and then what is the amount of money that you should try and plan for. So whether it's home health care, it's assisted living, or a full-on nursing home, which never want to use the word nursing home with a client, but we want to plan for care, then it identifies all of these different numbers. And then it breaks them down into a nice little chart. So consider using these, especially if it's early on in the discussion and you're not really sure where to start, and you want to show your clients how important it is to prepare for this and how crippling it can be if you don't have a plan in place. That is the healthcare cost assessment tool. Everything else is pretty definitional, all great information, but for purposes of the call, we're going to make sure we keep moving. I mentioned we have a nice comparison piece. This is the nationwide product details piece. You'll see that there's a Nationwide Care Matters product, the Lincoln Money Guard, the PAC, and then the One America, of course. Now, Nationwide's policy offers a single premium, a 5-pay, or a 10-pay. If the client chooses a 5-pay or a 10-pay, they can choose to pay monthly. There would be some leverage if they choose to do a single pay other than New York. So New York, of course, is always a little bit different. Whether you do a single pay or a 10-pay, you're going to get the same benefit regardless in New York. There's no leverage between any of the differences. I'd mentioned that we are an indemnity design. So with the exception of the PAC product, we are the only one on this page that pays a full cash indemnity benefit. The PAC product only pays a reduced amount. It's 80 or 85%, I believe, for the indemnity benefit. So if you're looking at that, just be sure that you know the percentage difference if it's a reimbursement or if it's a cash pool. I mentioned that we offer a return of premium feature. So on the single pay, day 1 of year 6, you can get 100% return of premium. Now, we found people buy these policies because they know that there's a really good chance that they're going to need them. So generally, we do not see these policies surrendered. People buy them because they know that they need to prepare for this. However, if there's a situation that they are in a tight spot or they need to get any type of money back, then they could do that. And then if they get out prior to, if the policy is a 5-pay or a 10-pay, if they get out prior to that, there's a vesting schedule in place for the applicable percentage when they want to pull their money out. So we do offer some additional options within our product. We, like I said, pay the full monthly benefit for regardless of their bills and expenses. So if you receive an illustration that says your client is entitled to $10,000 a month and they're on home health care and it only costs them $5,000 a month, then that additional $5,000 is theirs to do with it how they please. We offer the option for them to bank that in a separate account offered by Nationwide, or they can do whatever they want. In my own personal opinion, I say if they have leftover benefit, you could leverage that in some type of brokerage account and get more money. You might as well have your extra money work for more money. But the whole point around that is that we pay the full monthly benefit regardless of what the bills and expenses are, and you can really actually come out ahead on come claim time compared to a reimbursement policy, even though the reimbursement showed a larger benefit or larger monthly benefit on an illustration, because they're only going to pay what your bills and expenses were. We talked about the informal caregiving and how important that is, and we're the only one on this page that offers that. Christy had mentioned the underwriting process being a simplified underwriting process. So part 2 of the application being some medical questions, and then it's about a 45-minute to an hour-long phone interview with the client. And if it's 55 or older, then they're going to have a cognitive screening. At that point, it's literally just approved or declined, and that's it. We offer a couples discount, and then smoker, non-smoker, couples, non-couples. So it's a very straightforward underwriting process. As far as the elimination period goes, we have a 90-day elimination period. That is 90 calendar days. That is not 90 service days or anything like that. We would never put that stipulation in place because it would be so hard to hit a 90 service day elimination period. So if the client goes to their physician, the physician says somebody needs to come in 2 or 3 times a week, we count that as 7 days towards your 90-day elimination period. Once your elimination period's up, we send the full monthly benefit to the policy owner. We do have 3% simple as far as the inflation and 5% compound. We'll look at the illustrator when we take a look at some illustration ideas after we get through this piece. And we do offer international benefits. This is a really big deal, especially for the sales idea that we're going to look at. And the way it works is we offer 50% of the international benefit. That doesn't mean that they're going to give up the other 50%. It just means that it doubles the length of time that the policy works. So what we're going to look at next is actually a little bit of a different idea around case design. And I really like this idea. It's something that I'm a firm believer in, and it's something that you can only do with a cash product. You cannot utilize this next case design sales idea with a reimbursement policy. So when I receive phone calls to this day, and for the past 6 years that I've been running illustrations here at Nationwide, I generally get, for the most part, the same request. And generally that request is a 6-year benefit, maybe or maybe not with inflation. So why run a 6-year benefit? I say why run a 6-year benefit because generally speaking, claims do not last 6 years. There is always the exception, but the average claim lasting, depending on who you talk to, anywhere from 3 to 4 years is really the average of claim time. So if you receive an illustration for a 6-year benefit and you show this robust LTC pool and you only go through 4 years of it, then you lose out on 2 years. So the way to combat that is to run a 2-year benefit and a 5% compound. Now just bear in mind, this sales idea is really geared towards younger males that are healthy. And the reason that is A, because males do not believe that they're going to need long-term care. They are under the impression that they married, generally, their long-term care being their spouse, or they think they're healthy, so they're never going to need it. Well, the truth of the matter is, anybody who's healthy generally has a longer drawn out claim, but they're not under the impression that they're ever going to need it. So you position this a little bit different with a younger, healthier male to try and get over the hump to get them to buy into the concept. So I'm going to pull up the Nationwide Illustrator just so you can see it and be familiar with it. You should be able to see this is exactly how I run all my quotes every single day. We have a 55-year-old male, and then I mentioned we have tobacco, non-tobacco, and then married, civil union, domestic partnership. That could be anywhere from a 5 to a 7% discount. So make sure that you have that information while you're gathering the quotes. We're going to move to the next, and this product's super straightforward to illustrate. We have a single premium of $100,000 on that 6-year benefit with no inflation. And this is literally the only input that you can do. So it's very straightforward. So I'm going to run this. And when this runs, which only takes a second, I'm actually going to pivot over to the PDF. This is the same exact illustration. What you end up getting on this 55-year-old male, $100,000 single pay with a couples discount, is that robust $500,000 in change for the long-term care benefit and around $7,000 a month, which looks great. That's fantastic. But if that claim lasts 3 years, they get $254,000 out of that policy. They left half their money on the table. This concept is all about getting your money out of the policy as quick as possible and not leaving any money on the table. That is what it's all about. You do not want to leave money on the table. If they died after 4 years, they were unclaimed for 4 years, they went through $338,000. They never got to this $508,000. If they were unclaimed for 5 years, so this is above the average at this point, at $7,059 a month, they would receive $423,000 out of this policy, and they'd still leave a year of benefit on the table. So how do we combat that? Well, we run the 2-year benefit with 5% compound. Now, what I typically do is I go down to around age 80, and we start looking at benefits. We can look at it 2 different ways. We can look at it at 80, and we can look at it at 85. That's around where we would see some claims start. So at 80, we have $413,000. Now, if you were just comparing that to a 6-year benefit, you'd say, well, why wouldn't I go with the 508? Well, because you have a way better chance of in 2 years getting $413,000 and change out of the policy and receiving $16,825 a month. Also, bear in mind, HIPAA this year is $10,800 a month. That is the HIPAA per diem. So that is the threshold of funds that we will pay out tax-free regardless of bills and expenses. As I said, if they have accelerated or taken over that amount, they just need to be able to justify that they had qualified long-term care expenses and they would not pay tax. If they could not, they could still take that money and then just pay tax on it. So at 80, they got $413,000. On the 6-year benefit with no inflation, it took them over 4 years. It's around 4.5 years for the break-even point on that. That's at 80. If you take this a step further, go towards 85, you have a full $528,000 and change at $21,474 a month. Now, this is 30 years from now. HIPAA this year being 10.8, generally speaking, goes up every year. We would account for that inflation, and it should be pretty close to that 21 number in 30 years. So assuming HIPAA's raised to $22,000 in 30 years, which I don't think is too far-fetched, they could actually accelerate that full $528,000 and change tax-free. And they could get all their money out of the policy in 2 years and not leave a dime on the table. And then even on the back end, we'll go to this very nice grid here. On the back end, we'd still pay a guaranteed residual death benefit of $525,000. Since we currently have a 20% residual death benefit, it's the highest in the industry, and it's guaranteed to pay out on the back end, and there's no guessing or there's no caps or anything like that. So that's why it's so important to understand not only a case design that you can work with within a cash benefit policy that you can't do within a reimbursement policy, but to also understand what is and is not covered within the stipulations of the contract, and to try and future-proof that plan for things that may arise down the road that other policies would not cover or would not possibly reimburse for. So I want to just take a look at one last sales idea before we wrap up, because when I talk about these types of things and we have these discussions with you all, I have said over and over again, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face, it's very important to know what happens come claim time rather than just looking at two illustrations. So what we did here is we broke down a claim, really from illustration to claim time, and why it's important to have these discussions, not just pick a benefit pool or a premium, because when we look at this piece here, we're going to look at a reimbursement claim compared to an indemnity claim. And the first 4 rows are really going to be what happens on an illustration. So we have a $100,000 single pay on a female, I believe in her mid-50s. I believe 55 on this one. And when we look at 2 illustrations side by side, this is what the spreadsheet's going to show on these first 4 lines. Spreadsheet's going to show a reimbursement policy with $540,000 of non-guaranteed benefit, because the only way you can get that is if your bills account for the monthly being at $7,500. Nationwide's Care Matters cash pool is pretty much always going to show less, but it's guaranteed, and we'll look at what happens come claim time and how it can be valuable on the back end, and how these go really when the claim ends up happening. So they have $540,000, we have $450,000. Both have a 6-year benefit. That $540,000 over 6 years is going to break down to about $7,500 a month, and the Nationwide Care Matters is at $6,250 a month. So right off the bat, those first 3 cells, you're saying, well, why wouldn't I go with the reimbursement policy? Oh, and to boot, they have a 0-day elimination period, and the Care Matters policy has a 90-day elimination period. But that's not really the full story come claim time. So we're going to account for a home health care of about $4,000 a month. Of those $4,000 a month, the reimbursement policy pays them $4,000 a month. It didn't pay the $7,500, and we know that claims generally start in the home, and a lot of them that start in the home end in the home. So $4,000, they paid $4,000 over 48 months is what this claim is accounted for. The Nationwide policy, they have a $4,000 a month home health care cost. We pay the full $6,250. So that's additional funds that they bank that were not accounted for and wouldn't have shown up on a spreadsheet. We take into consideration our elimination period of 90 days. We paid out 45 months. The reimbursement policy did not have an elimination period. They paid out 48 months. In the end, we ended up paying out $281,000 in change, which was almost $90,000 more at the end of this claim compared to the reimbursement pool that you would have anticipated would have paid way more just by looking at an illustration. So that's why it's so important to consider these guarantees, and you know exactly what you're going to get in the transparency within the Nationwide policy, because there's no guessing game come claim time. You know exactly what you're getting. So that's everything that I wanted to cover. I know we covered a lot, everything from the informal care discussion to the healthcare cost assessment tool, some comparisons, or our product versus the competitors, and then that 2-year 5% compounding sales idea to try and get your money out of the policy as quick as possible without leaving any money on the table. With that said, I will turn it back to Christy, and we can certainly open it up for questions if anybody has anything for me.
Thank you, Jake. That was quite informative, and there was a few things in there that I wasn't aware of. So I found a lot of benefit to the webinar. One of the questions that has come in, and I don't know the answer to this, is does Nationwide offer list bill?
So that would be, as far as I know, yes. I know we have done it on our other fixed policies. So, and from what I understand, it's pretty straightforward. Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, that's just multiple people on one, right? And
right.
We offer list bill, yes.
Okay. From my point of view, I think it's very important to show the value of this type of policy. Have a story. Almost everyone, I mean, I know I has firsthand experience on what it's like to take care of someone, or someone who's taking care of someone, and what a hardship it can be on the family, and how valuable a policy like this just really comes into play. And there are some of these options that Jake has talked about are used every day. So, but I want you to feel free to reach out and call me, and we can go through some scenarios. If you have any cases that you work on, I'm more than happy to help. We will have this recorded, so I will be sending this out in the next few days once I get it back. So with that, are there any questions that anybody has? You can just type them in and we can get them answered for you. So will this product cover both husband and wife in one policy? The answer is no, but you do get a couple's discount, I should say. So the next question, Jake, I have a lady asking, how much per month would this illustration cost?
Which illustration? The sales idea or the sales piece that's still up? We're actually, regardless.
The one that's on screen.
The one that's on screen was a $100,000 single pay.
Right. The multi-pays are nice. However, if your client can afford the single premium, they're definitely going to get more leverage for their money. I think that's with any product.
Right, other than New York.
Other than the New York, correct. Now I have another question. Is there an age sweet spot for senior 60 and older?
So 60 and older, you start kind of having to back into some numbers just because you need to decide whether you can justify the inflation or not. So generally it takes a little bit of working with the illustrator. Usually when you start getting into the little bit older ages, you start seeing around that $75,000 to $100,000 all in to account for it. But it just depends on the case design, and it depends on how you build the illustration. So that's kind of a moving target. I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to really put a sweet spot on that just because of how the case is built.
When I've done illustrations for 60 and older, you're still getting, say it's a $100,000 policy, you're still getting probably about 3 to 4 times the amount, just depending on that age. But 65 to 66, there's more of a drop. Don't you agree, Jake?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. And then anytime you get into those later 60s is when you really start seeing it fall off.
Okay, one other question is why only 90-day elimination only with Nationwide when others have 0 elimination? I can answer that. The only LTC hybrid that we work with here at Premier that offers a 0 elimination is MoneyGuard. All the others have anywhere from a 60 day service day elimination period to a 90-day calendar day elimination period. Anything you can add to that, Jake?
No, I mean, that's spot on. That's exactly it. They're the only one.
So, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Let me leave you with my phone number, and please feel free to give me a call. My number is 800-365-8208, and my extension is 4082. Please feel free to give me a call. I will send this recording out once I have it as well. And with that, I thank everybody for attending. Take care.